Hello? Can anybody hear me? Hello? Good, good. Good morning, everybody. Oh gosh, there's lots of people. That's really good. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me on this rather dull morning here in Cambridge. It's so dull, I've had to put the electric lights on, so there's some light on my face. But I see there's some people in Sweden, and maybe it's even a little bit darker in Sweden than it is here. I don't know. But good morning to you all. Before I start, I'm most used to talking to large rooms and large audiences, and I can see the people that I'm talking to. It'd be really good if as many of you as can just say hello, good morning, whatever through the little chat thing, so I can see that you're all there and feel that I'm talking to somebody. So say hello, please, everybody. Oh, I can see Cindy's there as well. Hello, Cindy. You're listening. Good. So I'm glad that it's working. I'm glad that it's working. So I'm going to start with my first slide. So I'm outside the Department of Plant Sciences in the University of Cambridge. It's 2002. I've got the train down from Manchester. I'm studying for a master's in research in biology in Manchester, and I've come down to Cambridge for an interview to be a PhD student. And the door that you can see in the bottom of the slide there, that's the door to the reception area. So I went in there. I'm standing in the reception, and the receptionist tells me to go up to the head of department's office. So I go upstairs into the head of department's office, and in front of me I can see the panel of people who are interviewing me for my interview in Cambridge. And looking back on it now, I can't remember an awful lot of the questions that they asked me, but I do remember one question from Professor Julia Davis. And she said to me, what is it that you want to do after your PhD? And my answer was, I want to go into industry. And I think she, from my recollection, she chuckled a little bit and said that they didn't want to only just churn out the next captains of industry. The Department of Plant Sciences also wanted to provide the researchers of the future. And I must admit that it was something that never really entered my mind before I went to Cambridge, that actually a lot of people doing PhDs are doing PhDs because they want to go into an academic career. It had always been in my mind that I wanted to go on into industry. So that's kind of why I suppose I'm talking to you today. My name is Dr. Geraint Wyn Story, but it's much easier to call me Gez. That's what everybody calls me. I'll just type that in so you can call me Gez if you want. It's much easier. So today's talk is on how to connect with the industry after a PhD. So what I should do first of all is probably just tell you a little bit about myself. And I suppose in telling you about myself, one of the themes that will come through is that we tend to follow the examples that we see around us. I went to the University of Manchester, studied my undergraduate there, an undergraduate in biology, but it was an undergraduate with biology with a third year in industry. And I specifically chose that because even at the age of 16, 17, I was fairly clear that if I wanted to get a career in biology, which is what I thought I wanted to do after studying biology, that it was really going to be helpful to me if I'd got some experience, because you always hear those classic things, oh, we're looking for somebody with experience. Well, how do you get experience if you haven't got any? So I thought doing a sandwich course, that's what they called it, but this year in industry, was the right thing to do. And another reason why I chose to do that was because my brother had done a similar sort of thing. in an agricultural college in England called Harper Adams. He did a sandwich course, and after he finished his qualification, he went and got a job with those people. So I thought this was a good idea. And I suppose looking back, something which was consistent through pretty much all of my education was I thought that what you went and studied was what you went and did for a career afterwards. And I must admit, when I was studying in Manchester, and even when I came to Cambridge too, and saw the people who were studying classics and you know, medieval and modern languages, I did think to myself at the time, well, what kind of job are you going to get with that? And you know, I have now realised, you know, it took me a little while to figure out that actually what you study doesn't have to be what you go and get a career in, because actually the studying and the things that you learn actually sets you up for all manner of careers. So one thing I want to say is you don't have to be limited into a career into what you have studied. It's a natural progression, but you're not constrained by that. So yes, I went and did my undergrad in Manchester, and my third year was spent in industry. Actually happened to be down in a company that was just outside Cambridge, which is where I am now. But I came down and worked for a cereal breeding company. It was a small company that was owned by a large multinational called Novartis Seeds, which became Syngenta Seeds. But this was just a small farm, really. And I don't know if I really learned much about science there, but I did learn about industry. I learned about the world of work. I learned about getting up early. I learned about earning some money. I learned a little bit about being a bit more professional. And I think that put me in a good position to when I then went back to the final year of my undergrad, because a lot of my undergrad contemporaries were getting a bit jaded and a bit fed up of their work by then. But I went back kind of keen to go back, because I knew that actually being at university was quite a lot of fun compared to the sort of, well, not that the year of work wasn't fun, but I knew that being a student in Manchester was, you know, was a good thing. Anyway, so that was my first taste of industry. I then did a master's in research in Manchester because I wasn't certain about what I wanted to do for a career, what I wanted to do afterwards, if it was a PhD, if it was industry. So doing a master's in research was kind of a halfway house, really. And the style of that master's was you could do about 3 different projects. On the third one, I went and did with AstraZeneca, who were based just outside Manchester. And my interests at the time were plant sciences, but this project AstraZeneca had nothing to do with plant sciences whatsoever. But still in my mind was this idea that I needed to get industry experience. I'd had my year of industry experience as an undergrad, and I thought while I was doing my master's, even though the project was unrelated to where my interests really lay, a period again in industry would be a good thing. So I got some more experience there. And then that takes me up into my transition to Cambridge. I then applied for and got a PhD in the Department of Plant Sciences in Cambridge. And I suppose my industry experience had shaped that answer that I gave to Professor Julia Davis when I said what I wanted to do after my PhD was go into industry. But during my PhD, I didn't get any more industrial experience. I did a lot of other things. In fact, I did as many other things as I could except my research. I did enough research to be able to get a PhD, but I was at Clare College and I became the social secretary of the Graduate Society, the president of the Graduate Society. I was captain of the football team. I played cricket. I was in the society that they had in plant sciences. I pretty much did everything that I could except my research, really, because those were the things that I enjoyed doing. Okay, so this takes us on to possibly where you are now. This idea that, well, people keep asking you the question, do you think that you are going to go an academic career, or do you think that you are going to take a slightly different path and go and get a career in industry? And I suppose one of the most important things that I want to say is that I don't think that this representation that I've got here of these two roads which never come back together again, I don't think that actually reflects the reality of this decision. There isn't just industry or academia. I think there are many shades of grey in between. Many people start to work in academia. They might do a postdoc first for a few years. They might start that postdoc, in academia and then swap to industry later on. Or some people do move to industry and then come back to academia. These things aren't impossible, but the shades of grey in between are that there are many jobs which actually are a little bit of industry and a little bit of academia. My partner, for example, works in industry, yet manages to do a lot of publishing, which means that they have a lot of interaction with academia. So there are many things which are actually in between the two. It's not really a black or white, up or down, yes or no sort of thing. It's not a polar decision. There are many things in between. So that's one of the big things that I want to say. It's not a decision that is irreversible, and there are many things in between. Okay, so that's maybe where you are now, and I must admit I delayed that decision. I don't know if I actually did delay it. I just didn't even confront that decision really about what I was going to do after my PhD. I was so focused on the work I was doing, and actually I didn't have I see there's somebody got some problems with the internet, some delays somewhere. I hope it's okay for everybody. Anyway, so when I was doing my own PhD, I delayed that decision as long as I could. I was focused on getting results. I was focused on writing. Those were the things at the front of my mind. My career stage afterwards was really something I was just putting back and putting back and putting back, and not really engaging with that. And I can see that there is a right and a wrong to that, because yes, you do need a lot of focus on your work at the moment to be able to successfully get through the PhD, and it might be one approach to do nothing about the career until you've finished. But I think the earlier you can start thinking, you can actually shape your PhD a little bit around where it is that you want to be going to. But I'll come on to that a little bit more and tell you just a little bit about what I did next. So I didn't make that decision. I didn't make the right or left industry academia decision. And that's why once I'd handed in my dissertation for my PhD, the next thing I did was went and worked in a shop in Cambridge town centre. It was called the West Cornwall Pasty Shop, and I worked there for about 2 weeks. So that's kind of a cake shop in the middle of town, which was, it paid me a little bit of money for a bit. But whilst I was there, I suppose I was telling people that I'd handed in my dissertation. I was telling people that I was looking for a job, and a friend of a friend sent me an email, which was a job advert for to be a scientist in a plant biotech company in Cambridge. And that's what I've got on my next slide here. This was a company called Advanced Technologies Cambridge that was a fully owned subsidiary of a major multinational. But this was based on the Science Park in Cambridge. And I suppose it's interesting that I received an email from a friend about this, because that does represent kind of how I found most of the jobs that I've had in industry or out of industry since I finished my PhD. I haven't ever really trawled websites looking for jobs. I've been aware that I've been looking for jobs, but when I've been in that frame of mind, opportunities have come along and I've grabbed them. So in this instance, I was just working in that pasty shop for a short while, and a friend of a friend knew that I was interested in a job, so they sent me an email. And that was the job that I got here in industry. I started off as just a lab scientist, And within about a year, I'd been promoted to be the manager of a plant genomics group. But whilst I was there, I did kind of realise that once again, like my PhD, I was doing research, but I didn't have a passion for the research. I was always doing whatever else I could possibly be doing. Again, I was the staff council rep. I organised the away days for the staff. When students came to be, well, like I was a sandwich student during my undergrad, we took sandwich students, and I would be the supervisor of that student. So all of these things were sort of replacing the research that I should have been doing, but were always important parts of any company. But what I was coming to realize was that I could do research, but my passion wasn't there. And actually my skills were more in organizing things, working with people, with teaching. So that led me to my next career move. And I mentioned me not looking through websites, not looking through job magazines and sorts of things. The next job again came about because of an email I received, and this was because I was signed up to the career service in Cambridge. Excuse me. They just sent emails out every now and again with job adverts that were going. So I applied for this job and I got it. And that's kind of what I'm doing on this slide here. This next job that I did was working back in the University of Cambridge as a transferable skills training officer. What this meant was that I was coordinating, delivering, running workshops and activities and events which were helping PhD students develop transferable skills. Skills which would help PhD students in their research in the first place, but help them be more employable afterwards. And these were things like project management, time management, the ability to write their dissertations, networking, for example. So that's what I did for about 6 years. And that's where I've just moved on from recently. I've moved from that to being a freelance training consultant. So what's interesting about, well, my background there is a spell in industry, but the spell as being a skills officer, I suppose, has put me in a really good position to look back at industry and PhDs and look at the skills that people need to make the transition from PhD into industry, and why some people do that well and why some people don't do that as well as others. So that's what I'm just going to tell you a little bit about next. So I suppose the most important thing, I think, for connecting or reconnecting with industry after a PhD is self-awareness. Knowing who you are, what you want, but also how you come across to others. So some of the questions which are going to be really important, the sort of things I've just mentioned there, are things like, what have you got? What have you got? And by that I mean, what have you got that industry might be interested in? What have you got? It might be, okay, you've got a PhD. Maybe you've got good networking skills. Maybe you've got good presentation skills. So figure out what is it that you've got. The next question that might help you with your self-awareness is that, well, what do they want? What do they need? Do they actually need the things that you've got? The next thing will be, well, how do they see you? Because the way that you see yourself is not necessarily the same as everybody else. So you might need to start getting some feedback or put yourself in other people's shoes. And the next thing is, well, how do you see yourself? You need to look back at yourself, and that's where the feedback and asking others and just taking a step back and getting a sense of perspective is going to help you. And none of these things are really all that difficult, are they? They're not questions which you won't be able to find the answer to, but they're not they're not obvious questions, I suppose. They're not things which people would normally start to think of. But with just a few little bits of guidance like that, you can start looking at them. And the answers aren't that hard either. And also, it's interesting because none of those questions are actually specific to industry either. They're questions which are going to help you making a transition into any career after a PhD, whether it's industry or not. But it might be the answers which are a little bit more specific to industry rather than the questions. So your questions, no, sorry, your answers to those questions will be specific to yourself. They'll be specific to the career that you're interested in, but those questions are quite generic. So what I'm getting at here is that this really comes down to marketing. It comes down to you marketing yourself. It's like trying to sell something. And I don't know an awful lot about marketing, but I think there's some good sort of marketing questions which you can ask yourself, which is going to help you reconnect. So I've got an example here. This is somebody trying to sell donuts. You've got your donuts on display and you've got your price there. So first of all, you need to ask yourself, well, what am I trying to market? I'm trying to market, you're trying to market yourself. Then the next thing is, well, who is your market? And your market, in this case, you might be saying, well, my market is industry. Well, that's rather broad, actually. That's about half the employers in the world, for instance. And from what I know about marketing, it's very difficult for somebody to want something if what you're trying to market is so broad. So what you need to start doing is what they call segmenting your market. You might need to start slimming down which part of that market you're interested in. So instead of saying, I'm interested in a career in industry, you say, I'm interested in a career in pharmaceutical industry. Okay, so you've started to get a segment of that market. Then, but again, pharmaceutical industry is absolutely enormous. So which aspect of it, of the pharmaceutical company, is it that you're interested in? Maybe it's scientific communications, or maybe it's basic R&D. Okay, so now you're saying, I'm interested in R&D in the pharmaceutical industry. Well, what aspects of R&D? Maybe it's related to a treatment or something you've been looking at in your PhD. It might be arthritis research or Alzheimer's disease, something like that. So this is you starting to segment your market. Who is the market that you are aiming for? So the narrower you can, you don't want to go too narrow, because when you get to too narrow, there's almost nobody left. It needs to be broad enough so there's enough people there who might be interested in you, but not so broad that you're going to be not specific enough. So segmenting your market is quite important. Okay, so the next thing I think is really important is thinking, well, what do you want? And actually, that is the hardest question of all, I think. And it's something that we can't cover right here in this session. But you are going to have to go away and think about, well, what is it that I want? Is a career in industry actually what I want? Or am I just thinking of that because that's the obvious alternative to academia? So thinking about what you want. Is what you want money? Is what you want security? Is what you want longer term contracts? Or do you need to be based in a certain country, close to your family? Is what you want a challenge or something that's rewarding or fulfilling? These are sorts of questions which you're going to have to start asking yourself, because once you know more about what it is that you want, you're then in a much better position to find out what it is that's going to give you what you want. So just blindly finding a job and hoping that job gives you what you want is more of a lottery, really. Yes, you might find the job that gives you what you want, but you might have to go through half a dozen jobs first. So if you can decide what it is that you want, that might then help you decide that first question: who is your market? Maybe it's going to be an industry which is less about profits and more about helping people, or it might be that it is much more profit driven. So those are things which are really going to help you at least connect with the right industry that you want. So that is a really tough question. The next thing you need to wonder about is, well, after what you want, what are the positive associations with PhD students? So again, this is a bit of a marketing trick. We've thought about, well, who is the market, trying to segment the market. If you're thinking about your self-awareness, let's just put yourselves in the position of somebody from industry for a moment. People from industry are going to be thinking, well, why do I want a PhD student? Why don't I just want someone who's got an undergraduate degree? So I want to put this question to you. I'm just getting a notice here, so my internet has been interrupted. Sorry, I hope everything's still working. Is everything still working? Say yes if everything's still working. Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. I'm genuinely put this question to you. I want you to type in the little box, the message box, what positive associations do you think employers have of PhD students? And I've got a couple of examples. Might be things like they might think that PhD students are good at, problem solving, excellent. What about, good laboratory techniques? Yeah, planning, excellent. Yeah, keep going, folks. Keep typing. Time management, brilliant. Creativity, critical thinking. Keep going, keep going. I want you to think of as many positive associations. People management, yeah. Autonomy, collaboration, finding resources, design of new project, abstract thinking. Keep going. Keep going with more. Are there more positive associations? Good. Okay. Well, that's really good, because you have to think, well, how can I make the most of those positive associations? You've got to associate yourself with that. But when you are claiming to have association with those positive things, you've got to be able to give evidence. A friend of mine is a careers advisor, and one thing they see all the time on CVs or hear in job interviews is people saying things like, I'm good at communication skills. Well, brilliant, you're great at communication skills. What evidence do you have for that? Well, the evidence might be, well, actually, I've given several talks in international conferences, and actually I've visited schools to lead an outreach project to try and encourage kids to come to university. That might be, some examples. So you're going to have to give evidence of those positive associations that you've just given. Evidence of team player, evidence of work planning, evidence of leadership skills. So first of all, figure out what the positives are. Now the next question, this is looking at the other side of the question. What are the negative associations that you think employers might have of PhD students? So go for it again. Give me some examples of, no work experience. Good. Keep going, folks. I'll read them out. Yeah, overqualified. Yeah. They might want higher salaries. Yeah. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, this one's a little bit harder. There's not as many answers coming this time. Too much focus. Yeah. Slight arrogance. They might not want to get, also they might not get on well with people who don't have PhDs. Ego, no knowledge of the outside world. Yeah, thank you. These are exactly the sorts of things. I've got to, I'm going to show you here. When I was planning this session, where's the thing? I wrote a mind map. And these things in green, I sat down and did this exercise myself. And the positives I came up with are that PhD students are detail orientated. They're usually very honest about their work. They're used to working on long projects. They have resilience, good at problem solving, good at putting in hours and hard work, very good at presenting, good at writing, good at techniques. Those are the sorts of, quick examples I came up with, and they seem like just the sorts of things that you've been mentioning there. Then I did the negatives, and I think again this does very much match the sorts of things you've said there. I said no commercial experience, because a lot of what employers are looking for, they often want people who've got some commercial experience. I also put down inefficient, and I look at myself doing my own PhD. I did very long hours, and actually often in industry is a 9 to 5 kind of job, and you've got to figure out, I was a molecular biologist, for example, in plant sciences. How can I be a molecular biologist working 5 days a week when I'm used to being able to come in at weekends and come in at evenings? So inefficiency might be one issue. No team experience, sometimes a little bit unprofessional. You're used to being relaxed in those conversations that you have with professors, saying exactly what you're thinking, or having a lot of camaraderie. Well, that might sometimes come across as being a little bit unprofessional in industry. Elitist, I think that was, somebody mentioned ego and those sorts of things. It might be that, yeah, you might look down your nose at people who haven't got a PhD. So, but maybe you don't. But these are the sorts of things that employers might think, and also lacking the big picture. So I don't want to get too negative and too down on these things. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that employers are going to have positive and negative associations with PhD students. And what you've got to do is manage that. Look for those things in yourself and figure out, well, how can I market that? How can I acknowledge and address those negatives and really give great examples of the evidence that I have for the positive associations? Just thinking about how it is that people see you, because you've got to figure out what you look like through their eyes. What is it that they see in a PhD student? Why do they want a PhD student instead of just a graduate? So it is a question of how you see yourself. The next thing is, what is your unique selling point? Your unique selling point. So that will be a combination of the broad positive associations which have with PhD students, but something which is specific about you as well. And if you are going to market yourself, you've also got to define yourself from all the other PhD students who are applying for that job. So your unique selling point. If I look at myself, I had to do this exercise about 6 months ago when I was changing careers into becoming a freelancer. What's my USP? Well, my unique selling point is that it's a combination of things. It won't be just one thing. So it's a combination of things. For me, it's that I have a background in academia, in life sciences. I also have industry experience in the life sciences, but I also have a background in learning and development. Now, with just one of those things on my own, okay, I've got a background in academia and life sciences. Well, so have, I don't know, 500,000 other people. But I've also got industry experience. Then you go, okay, now instead of being 500,000, we're starting to look at maybe 50,000 people. But I've also got 6 years of experience in learning and development. Now we start coming down to me being one amongst only several hundred people. So this is me starting to figure out what is my unique selling point. So when I go to an employer, I can tell them what my unique selling point is, what sets me apart from everyone else. So I want you just to take a minute or so, think about the positive associations, think about the negative associations, also think about the other experiences that you have, your personal strengths, your aspirations. Have a think for a second. What is your unique selling point? Make a note of it for yourself. You don't have to write this, but if anybody does want to volunteer their unique selling points in the chat line, do go for it. I mean, it's great if we can see some examples, but don't feel that you have to, because it's obviously quite a personal thing. So I do encourage you, just take 1 minute, or let's say 1 minute, and I'll let you think about what is your unique selling point. Okay, yeah, there's a good example. Interdisciplinarity is really important these days. It's what lots of funding people are looking for. But I'll be quiet for a moment while you're thinking. Keep going for it though. I'd like some more examples if there's any out there. Okay, that's just 1 minute. I don't want to push that too much. Yeah, someone's just asked about languages. As people were talking there, I think it's good. The more specific you can make it, the better. My example, I suppose, was just based on my work experience, but you can start to give it more details. For instance, my USP, as well as having a learning development background, I might say, well, I love giving presentations. I have a very friendly or outgoing nature, or I know, confidence, or there might be things that you start to, your personality combined with the experiences and the work experience you have really starts to define you and make you absolutely unique. So let's have a look at some other examples there. Languages, yeah, I also might speak half a dozen languages. That might really set you apart from other examples of other people, because you might be then much better at traveling for that company or organization, because some of these companies are multinational these days. Ability to think globally. I'd want a little bit more evidence on that. What does that mean? Ability to think globally. Tell me a little bit more about that. Experience in technology, which is going to implement in many industry. Big data, yeah, big data, that's a real big buzzword these days. International experiences, having studies and worked in five countries, that's good. And that word, oh, enthusiasm, I think that is supposed to be, and inquisitive personality, yeah, those are the sorts of things which are going to identify your unique selling point and really help employers find out who you are. So that's one thing, just getting a list of things together. The next thing that you've got to think about is how you manage that image. And that's why I've got this picture here, because you are going to have to manage yourself as a brand, as somebody who is almost like up on stage that people see. So, and there's, in this day and age, in the day and age of webinars and so much internet access, you might think that people can't see you at home or studying, whatever, but people can find out an awful lot about you just by Googling you. And this is what a lot of employers are doing these days. You hear more and more about jobs being offered to people through LinkedIn. So you have got to figure out how you manage your digital presence. That's one thing. The first, probably the most important thing about managing your image. When somebody Googles you, what do they find? So it might be, try it now, just maybe open Google for a second, put your name into Google and have a look at what turns up. Maybe I can do the same as well. Opening Google. Yeah, some of that stuff's a little bit out of date. my job at the University of Cambridge comes up. I'm not doing that anymore. But LinkedIn does come up as number 3 for me. Facebook comes up as number 4. Yeah, so this is probably what an employer will do. If they've read your CV and they're interested, they will then have a look at Googling you. And you need to make sure that what appears on Google when someone puts your name in is something that you want people to see. So you might do things like make sure that your LinkedIn profile is completely up to date. You might want to make sure that your Facebook profile, if it's entirely social, has got the right privacy settings on it, so people don't see you, partying or drunk, because people will start to make judgments, whether you like it or not. I was directing a grad school course, which is a residential course for about 96 PhD students. This was about 2 or 3 years ago, and we have 96 PhD students on course, residential, for 3 days, and we have a team of tutors. And about 9 o'clock the night before the course started, one of the tutors had to drop out. He was ill, so I was left with a member of staff less than I needed. So this bunch of students wouldn't have a tutor. So I got on the phone to as many people as I knew. Nobody was available. They'd love to have done it, but they couldn't do all 3 days. And I was really close to giving up. And then at about 11:30 at night, I put a message onto Facebook, because it's a Facebook group for tutors who do this course. I put the message on Facebook at about 11:30 with my phone number, and there was no response. But about 4:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed, and I must have been half sleeping because I was worrying about this. My phone buzzed from somebody who I'd never heard of, a guy called Andrew Halfaker. Said, yeah, I'm willing to come and work on this course. And I had no idea who this guy was. So I put his name into Google, and his first thing that came up was his LinkedIn profile. And I checked him out. He was a professional trainer. He'd coaching experience. He'd worked on grad schools before. I could see that some of his contacts were people that I knew and trusted. So I took a chance. I sent him a message and say, yeah, come along. And he was with us by 9 o'clock the next morning. And so networking really works. And it's because he had a good LinkedIn page. I spoke to him about it afterwards, and he said he wasn't even aware of his LinkedIn. He'd made it years ago. But you have to make sure that these things are up to date. He got work, and I've worked with him loads of times since, because of that chance of me putting out that call. So one really important thing is you have to network. You've really got to play the game there. And networking isn't just you going to those sessions at conferences, which are called the networking session. It's happening all the time. So your digital presence, that static LinkedIn page, needs to be up to date. It needs to have a good picture on it. I saw that Cindy put a photograph of me around advertising this course. I got a friend of mine who is a photographer to take a reasonably professional looking photograph of me. So why not do that? Why not see if you've got a friend who can take a professional photograph of you, so you can put that on your own website or on your LinkedIn page or on Facebook. And also getting some business cards made. I've got a couple here. These things are really important. They might seem a little bit corporate, a little bit old-fashioned, but having business cards, for a start, it does look professional. It looks like you're prepared, and it means that people can remember you, who you are and what you do, and get in contact with you afterwards. Even as a PhD student, really good idea to get some business cards. And an example of some networking, it was about 2 years ago, or the early winter of 2014. Britain had a really bad winter. It wasn't snowing, but we had an awful lot of rain, and the southwest of the country was completely covered in rain. There were floods absolutely everywhere, and down in the southwest, people were really stranded. People were isolated in their villages, and they felt that nobody was helping them. But just before Christmas, there was a young guy called Charlie. I wrote his name down earlier. Charlie Southcott, and he'd been to a carol service, and at the carol service he was sitting next to this guy who was a commander in the Royal Marines, and he got chatting to him, and he was such a charming young chap, he got his business card off him. Anyway, a few months later, when they had these floods, his parents' cars and all the cars in the local village were all parked on one side of the village. Then the road out of the village was next to the river, and it got completely washed away. So everyone in this village was completely stranded. They couldn't get anywhere. And the council couldn't get anywhere either. And then Charlie remembered meeting the commander from the Royal Marines in the carol service before Christmas. And he passed on the business card, the contact details of that guy in the Royal Marines to the people in the council. And the council got in contact with the Royal Marines, and the Royal Marines drove their boats up the river and rescued all the cars from the village and put them on the other side of the village, so everybody in that village could suddenly then go to the shops, go to the supermarket and go and see their family. And it all came about because this one guy, Charlie Southcott, at the church service, talked to the guy who was next to him, made an impression on him, and got his business card. And that's a true story. You can go and look that up on the internet. It's a fascinating story, but it really shows the power of networking. And networking doesn't just happen at conferences and things like that. It happens all the time. You don't know when it's happening or not. So always have a business card ready. Be ready to chat to people and pass on your contact details. So, so the final things that I want to say is about you need to find out what the gaps are out there. And you can find out what employers want by going through the career service or job agency websites or whatever. Find out what industry are looking for nice and early. But if you Google these things, you'll find out the sort of things that industry are looking for are things like the gaps that they know are there are commercial experience, professional experience, being a team player. But if you do your research and find out what employers want, you can then go and get the right experience that they need. So you have direct experience. And this is my final slide here. This is about you getting your hands on, getting your hands dirty, having some hands-on experience. Even if it's big or small, you need to go and get some experience. For instance, I know that in the University of Cambridge, not many students do this, but you can intermit. You can actually stop the clock on your PhD if you want to go and do an internship for a little while. You can go and get some work experience in an area and then come back and carry on your PhD. Or maybe you might be able to set up a collaboration so that collaboration is integrated into your PhD, a collaboration with industry, because the PhD is a time when you can shape what's going on. Or there might be societies that you can join within the university, societies which organise, well, for instance, I know in Cambridge there is a consultancy society, and they do a consultancy for free. They contact companies and say, are there consultancy projects which we could have a go at? They don't expect payment for them, but they're getting work experience. Or there might be entrepreneurial societies that you have in your university, or even if it's getting some commercial experience by being the treasurer in the, I don't know, the football team or the debating society. You're going to have to go and get as much experience as you can, so those employers think that you've made an effort and you do have some of the skills that they're looking for. So even if it's just a small experience, use that evidence and make it relevant to the application that you're looking for. And the final thing that I want to talk about is just CVs, cover letters and interviews. And I'm sure you could have another whole webinar on CVs, cover letters and interviews. I'm not going to say much about them, but what you can start to think about now with the CVs, cover letters and interviews is the sorts of things that we were talking about earlier, the marketing, figuring out what are the positive associations, the negative associations, what evidence do you have of your skills and abilities, those experiences you might have in the societies, figuring out how you market yourself. Marketing yourself is what you're doing in those CVs, cover letters and interviews. And the most important thing you can do for any professional organization, whether it's industry or not, is build trust. Trust is the only thing you can put across, really. That's why they employ people, because they trust you. What you are really selling is confidence. They need to have confidence in you. So a good looking CV that's well structured, well organized, easy to read, shows the right sorts of skills, is in on time. They are demonstrations of your professionalism, of your engagement, of who you are. They say a lot about you, and they start to establish trust. Employers have to trust the people that they're employing, and that paperwork, that interview, the CV, the cover letter, is where you establish trust. Okay, I think that's about the final thing I wanted to say. So there's my contact details. My Twitter account is at the bottom. There's my email address if there's any things you want to contact me about. But I'm also happy to do a bit of question and answers now if anybody has any specific questions that they'd like to ask. Is there anybody there? Any questions? Okay, if nobody has any questions, that's okay. I'll stay online for a minute or two just in case. But otherwise, thank you very much. Don't be afraid to get in contact with me if there's anything you want to ask. And I can tell you a little bit more specifically about the industries that I have been in if you want. But okay, there's a thank you very much. Great webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't go on too long. Good, thank you. I'm just going to bring the laptop a little closer to me so I can type a bit more easily. So I see a question from Sinora, which is asking, why did you choose to do research? I think that's a really good question, and I think it's really interesting because most questions in interviews can be anticipated, and that's a good one. Why did you choose to do research? And I'm not going to give you a stock answer. I'm not going to give you a model answer, because I think the most important thing you can do in an interview is be honest and be authentic, but turn everything into a positive. So they ask you why you chose to do research. You might say, well, at that time, I don't know. My answer would be because when I was doing my master's, I was unsure about whether I wanted to go into industry or academia. So I chose to do research so that I could still make the transition into industry. And when I did, I would have much more experience, and I'd be able to perform a lot better in industry. I know that's just some crummy example off the top of my head. But what's interesting with all of those answers, you need to make the answer about them and not about you. So instead of saying I chose to do research so I could get a qualification, which would mean that I could come into higher industry at a higher position and then get promoted more quickly, that says a lot about what you want, not about what they want. So you could turn it to being about what they want by saying, well, I feel that having done qualification in research at PhD, it means that I could then perform better, much better in industry, have a better appreciation of the demands of research and the reality of research, and I'd have more experience at managing other people, so I could do much better for that organization that I was working for example, just as a subtle way of changing it to being about how you can help them rather than how that can help you. I hope that helps a little bit. Someone's just asking, yeah, there's a list of positives and negatives. I don't know, I could type in some of those in a moment if you want. Or maybe I could email them to Cindy, and then Cindy could forward them on to everybody. They weren't exhaustive, I must admit. They were just exactly what you'd done there. I sat down for a few minutes and just thought of as many as I could. I'm just going to have a little look back up over the questions to see if there's any that I've missed. Question from Olena. If you are not sure after PhD which road to take, is it a difference to go to industry directly after PhD or after a few years of postdoc? I think that's a really interesting question, actually. And I know that my friends who I was referring to earlier, who are careers advisors, were careers advisors for postdocs. And I think that's actually a lot harder than careers advising just for PhD students, because when people have postdoced for a few years after a PhD, you become, how can I say, even more specialized, I suppose. So if you are doing a postdoc and are thinking about industry, that is your time to start making those connections with industry, because you are getting older, you're getting more experienced, but you're getting more specialized as well. And you have to turn it around to think about the employers again. If they were already thinking why a PhD student and not somebody with just an undergraduate, why would they think, we want somebody with a postdoc over a PhD? You may think you've got many more years of experience, so that's the experience that you're going to have to put across to them. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing a postdoc and then changing into industry. And I think actually postdocs do have lots and lots more skills. They've got more experience than PhD students. But sometimes I find that there are people who are doing postdocs who are thinking, it's too late to change, I'm now specialised, who on earth would ever employ me? Actually, you've got loads and loads of skills. So keeping positive about it, listing those lists of positives and negatives, I don't really think there's much difference between the employer looking at a postdoc and a PhD student, really. So just recognizing what you've got and maybe what you've got in addition to the skills that you had as a PhD would be really useful. What other questions are there? Sorry, I was a bit woolly on that answer. Anyway, Cindy says she's going to post those lists of words that I put up there. But if there's any other questions, do get in touch. I do post things which are relevant to these sorts of things on Twitter, so have a look at my Twitter account, and there's all sorts of various things there which are linked to academia and linked to skills training. I hope you find some of those things useful. But I think it's probably time to go now, I think. So thank you all very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been a useful session. Hope to see you all again soon. Okay. Bye, everybody. I've got to find where's the quit button. Okay. Take care.